Welcome to the riskadvisor.com podcast. I am Jim Henry, and here with my good friend and co-host, Sal Lafreri. Today's topic, Technical Surveillance Countermeasures, or TSCM, is the work of providing sweeps to detect, locate, and nullify unauthorized surveillance devices such as transmitters, recording devices, wiretaps, hidden cameras, or other eavesdropping threats. Most people think that this is spy novel stuff, but in reality, it is a critical area that most security directors and corporate leadership pay little attention to until it's too late. So, Sal, this is definitely an area that you spent a good part of your career. Is that really true? It's always until it's too late?
Always until it's too late. The big problem we always used to see, and I'm sure our guest today will confirm this, is people always say, I have nothing nobody wants. Why would they steal from me? And they just don't recognize the value of it. And it's just amazing from either competitive intelligence, when you look at international, when you start talking about state-sponsored stuff, when people are working on government contracts. So it's the bigger stuff. But even at the smaller level, and people say, well, why would somebody want to know what I'm up to and what am I doing? I'm not that important. And then they get hurt, and they get hurt big time. And that becomes the problem. But it's way more prevalent than we think. And as technology grows, and I'm sure we'll get into this, as technology grows, you wind up seeing these devices become smaller and smaller and more sophisticated in the capabilities. Early on, you had to be able to have a battery that was able to run, and you had to be able to get into a facility to plant the device. And then you had to go back and be able to get it out. Where now, you don't even need to get there. You can run on power from the building. You can run on PoE systems. You could do all kinds of stuff with this. So it's some pretty interesting stuff. And I always got a kick out of playing with it. So, but anyway, want to introduce our guest?
Certainly. So Charles Patterson is our guest today. He is the founder and president of Exec Security TSCM. Charles began working in the security field in 1978 in executive protection and technical services. His responsibility included traveling on security details through the United States and to over 40 different countries, as well as providing technical support for a number of electronic security systems. So, Charles, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Can you explain to us what Technical Surveillance Countermeasures, TSCM, is and why the sweeps are necessary?
Sure. TSCM is the abbreviation, as you said, for Technical Surveillance Countermeasures, which are all long words, but if you break it down, technical surveillance, and you want to have countermeasures against any kind of surveillance. Now, surveillance can be all kinds of things. There could be somebody just watching you from down the street. But in technical surveillance, especially as Sal alluded to, technology today offers so many opportunities for people to conduct some kind of surreptitious surveillance, unauthorized, from cameras to microphones, recording devices. All types of things can be a threat. And also, as Sal was saying too, a lot of people think they don't have much to hide, but then once something happens, for instance, if it's a small business, they may think they're just a small business, but their clients may be handling work for much larger corporations. So even a small business has concerns. A medium business undergoing a merger or an acquisition, there's information there that would be highly valuable to a competitor or any kind of adversary.
And the availability of the devices. I mean, at one time it was, relatively sophisticated devices that you had. I know when I consult with, with people and they have a concern regarding, some type of hostile surveillance that's taking place, especially if it's electronic, and they think they have an idea of who might be doing it. I always ask, what's the technical capability of that person? Are we looking at an idiot that, can go online and buy something for $15? Or are we talking about somebody that's got a whole lot better technical capability? Because then the attack becomes that much more sophisticated. And when you're doing the sweep, as I'm sure you'll get into when you're doing the sweep, you start thinking about what's the level of the sophistication you're going against. If you're going against state-sponsored as compared to, the jealous boyfriend.
Right.
So, it's kind of, it's a problem. Talk to us about, security related incidents. In pre-production, we had talked about, different types of incidents, different types of, causations for buggings. So talk to us a little bit about what those related incidents are.
So when there's some kind of an incident that occurred just in general security, people may think, somebody broke in, therefore we're just going to have to lock our doors. Maybe somebody's purse was stolen or something like that. But there could have been something else going on. A big concern whenever we come to a client's facility is to understand how well secure are they in their facility. Do they have good access control? Do they have camera systems in place? Do they have guards in place? What are their policies and procedures? Because all of that is helpful in protecting their facility, as well as understanding how someone might have breached that if someone was trying to attack them to get some information out. If video cameras show that someone has been going in and out of a boardroom prior to or after a meeting, what were they doing there? Were they just cleaning, or, did they have reason to be there? Maybe they were planting a recording device.
Sometimes these are done as a result of requirements, right? They're compliance issues, and they have to be, ensuring that they're doing, taking all the steps necessary. But sometimes it's not, and getting them to make that jump, go over that first hurdle to understand that, something may have been taken, becomes somewhat of an issue for them. Again, it goes back to they think that we don't know what we lost. There's just nothing for us to take. But you bring up a strong point. If you have a company that's doing, you may not necessarily be the target. It's the information that you have that becomes the target. We had a situation, you talk about mergers and acquisitions, where an accounting firm was doing some record keeping and cleaning up some records for a company. What they want, what the bugging was about, and the attempts to get the information out, wasn't to bring down the accounting company. It was to bring down that one particular client and find out what they had, and that's where we lose part of that.
So, Charles, we're now about 6 months into this into COVID, with a lot of CEOs working from home. So, I would imagine that some of the risks have been abated about people, unknown people getting into boardrooms and whatnot at the place of business, where they could be putting in listening devices. But I'd imagine that there's also increased vulnerabilities, at home, especially with homes that might not have a great distance between them and adjoining buildings, or what have you. And are the CEOs are they lured into a level of security that is a false level of security, that because they are at home, they're not as at risk?
It could very well be. Typically, homes are not as well protected as a corporate office would be, in terms of security, in terms of guards, in terms of access control. So now that the executives have moved home, of course, they're on a Zoom call or a teleconferencing call. There's concerns with perhaps their IT and the management of their network, but at the same time, everything that they're talking about on that Zoom call or on some other call in their home office, that's the same content that used to take place in the boardroom or in the executive office. But now they're at home. Could someone have gotten up to their house to plant something? Do they have cleaners? Do they have housekeepers? Any work going on in the house? All of these things could be a concern. And just in general, they now have moved the target out of the office and over to their home. So before the COVID problems, we were regularly scheduled for boardrooms and executive offices for a lot of corporations. When they locked down, those jobs stopped. But now we're getting calls to come out to the executives' homes just to take a look, just to make sure. And also, it helps provide a baseline. If we've been there once, we don't try to be intrusive at all. As much as possible, we try to work with the situation. But if something happens later, if there happens to be a car parked nearby that seems suspicious, if they happen to see somebody walking through their yard, if we've already been there once, it'll be much easier to come back in and double check to make sure nothing has been planted or left behind.
Right, and with most homes being of wood frame construction, not as sealed or screened, RF wise, the ability to snoop from a greater distance is
that's true. And also, people are particularly an executive may have a vacation home as well, or they may be going away for a little bit, even during COVID. So their house may have been empty, or left somewhat open for a while. Now they're coming back. Now they better try to make sure that everything's safe.
Well, even one of the things that always surprises me is when people bug themselves and they don't even realize it. I've had multiple clients where you go in and they're concerned about at the home, they're concerned about somebody coming in and planting a device and listening, and you give them kudos for that. And then as you're doing the sweep, you realize that they got a nanny cam, or my favorite was always the baby room monitor, right?
Right.
Because the baby room monitor would always be, parents would take that thing, they'd put it next to the crib. The microphone on it is incredibly sensitive because they want to be able to hear every breath that the child is taking. And they take the little receiver and they put it on their hip, and they think that transmitter is transmitting only to the receiver on their hip. When in reality, it's a radio transmitter. And you could be a quarter of a mile away and listening to everything that's going on. And it's on all the time. They never turn it off. And they wind up bugging themselves. So, you try and explain to them that, sometimes you don't even have to get into the home to put the device in. If you're going to do half of the job for me.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things that we look for also when we're doing a sweep, any kind of vulnerability, and all those things that you mentioned and more, we find on a regular basis, something that was unintended but has left them open, whether it be at a home or in the office. We're always trying to pay attention to that. It could be an air vent that extends to maybe apartment next door or an office next door. And then someone could put their ear to the vent and hear everything that's going on. Those kind of things happen.
Well, camera systems now that you can hang on a Wi-Fi network.
Right.
And it's got audio to it.
A lot of people are using cordless phones at their home, and most cordless phones these days are digital and maybe encrypted, but still a lot of people have older things out there or something that may not be functioning right and still may be broadcasting or, as you said, bugging themselves.
It's true. All right. Well, we just want to remind the people listening that you're all listening to the Risk Advisor podcast hosted by Jim Henry and me, Sal Lafreri. We invite you to comment on our blog at theriskadvisor.com and to subscribe and follow us on our social media like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you're interested in having one or both of us speak at an upcoming event, either in person or virtually, we can definitely set that up. And if you are interested in that, please go to the webpage, theriskadvisor.com, and help set that up. So let's get into segment 2, and let's talk about what are the different categories of sweeps, the different types of inspections. They normally fall into a couple of different categories. Talk to us about the categories. I think the first one being probably proactive.
Yeah, so we're contracted to do sweeps. There's usually 3 categories. The first being, as you said, the proactive inspection, where it's not that they think anything necessarily has been going on, but they just want to be sure. It could be due diligence. Particularly, a lot of companies are dealing with millions and even billions in investments. They owe it to their shareholders to ensure that they're taking the best steps possible by coming in on a regular basis, whether it's biannually or quarterly. we will already be familiar with their space. We'll have a baseline of the radio signals. We'll understand what kind of things are there, because a key element in doing a sweep is looking for any changes, looking for anything that might be different. So if we come in and the last time we were at the office, we saw certain types of signals. We know sometimes light switches may be putting off radio signals. There may be other types of equipment around, and we'll be familiar with that. Next time we come in, we may see that there's something a little different. Now we better find out, what is that coming from? And that's one of the great values in that.
Talk to us a little bit. Speaking of, you mentioned light switches, and it just kind of dawned on me. Telephone systems today, about how deadly they are now as far as being able to be used as a bugging device.
Telephone systems have lots of vulnerabilities. Most office phone systems have moved into the voice over IP category. Yet even in the most sophisticated corporate offices, they still have copper line phones. Sometimes it may be a conference phone sitting on a desk, or it may be a emergency phone. A lot of times we'll find them in the AV room outside of a major boardroom. There's one phone hanging on the wall. It just happens to be an old phone because it'll work even if the other system goes down. But at the same time, the copper wires are easy to intercept. So that becomes a vulnerability. With the even more sophisticated phone systems, there's a lot of areas to look into. Some of it may be on the network. Voice over IP phones are basically running on a computer network. So there's vulnerabilities there in terms of vulnerability to hacking, to being able to add encryption. But along with that, they're part of a system that includes voicemail. It includes remote access, a number of different features. And a lot of people ignore the vulnerabilities that exist right within the phone system itself. Every phone system today includes an option they call Supervisor Monitoring. Typically, it's if you're going to have a large call center with maybe 500 or 1,000 agents answering tech support calls or customer service calls. There's always a feature that allows a supervisor to monitor calls. That's just built in because that's what phone system customers have asked for. It's usually turned off. But in a corporate office, even though they may not be using that system, they need to make sure that kind of feature is not active, or find out who has authority to use it, the authorizations inside the system. So someone could be just using the standard phone system right in the office to do a bugging. They could be dialing into somebody else's office and turning on a feature, listening in.
One of the things we would always ask when we're in the consulting of, again, somebody believes that they're being at a vulnerable level, is we ask them to do an audit of the phone. And it's incredible how many times the CEO's phone, in a simple setup, he has an instrument on his desk. He has one by his couch, and he has a secretary outside that can answer the phone. And then all of a sudden, you find out that there's a fourth one. And where's the fourth phone?
Right.
And it turns out it's on somebody's desk, 2 floors away, that they can actually listen in on what you got.
The people who manage the phone system, they have a lot of power. So our clients, we tell them they need to make sure that their telecom people and their IT people similarly need to be trusted. They may need to put a little extra care into that area too.
So, Charles, you mentioned in the different categories of sweeps that, I guess a higher level of a proactive recurring sweep is a special event sweep. How does that differentiate itself from a normal proactive
So the
sweep?
special events come up for us often. That could include a board meeting. It could include a senior management meeting. They may be using a hotel, down in Miami someplace, and deciding that, they're going to have all the senior management come from around the country, discuss where the company's going, what the future holds, unveil some new plans, at board meetings, and any other kind of event like that takes place. It could even be product announcements. So when we're contracted for those, if it's an event taking place at the office, that's where If we've been there for proactive sweeps, it really helps because we'll already know the space. Quite often we're going into an area perhaps we haven't been before. So it may take a little extra time. We have to be a little extra careful. But that's what we see as kind of the second category. And there could be a variety of events, as I mentioned, just a few, but there could be others where it suddenly occurs to them, hey, we're going to be discussing some important stuff here. Let's make sure we're safe. And
then they come in with the wireless microphone.
Well, that's something that we have to look at. We swept one large auditorium the night before the meeting. Then the next night we were there, and there was a whole new signal. It turned out they had added a new wireless feature for the person on the stage to be able to listen in, a talkback feature for him to be able to listen in to the director. And it was unencrypted, transmitting at a 900 megahertz signal that anybody could tune in on a scanner.
I would imagine that those offsite special events are very dynamic, and often they're only setting those systems up, the day or hours before the event. So that really becomes a challenge.
They're complex systems. We've worked with AV companies. Sometimes we see the same people because it's an AV company. And many of them are very confident, or I should say competent in dealing, and they understand the security needs. Like even, for instance, video production, they're often wearing headsets to talk to each other. They're not talking to people in the company. They're just talking to each other. But while their microphones are on, they could be broadcasting everything that's going on in the event. And along with the event itself, there's typically lots of smaller meetings that go along with it, whether it be an audit committee, some other financial committee, having small meetings. So typically we may be contracted to sweep an auditorium, but as well, there may be 3 or 4 small breakout rooms that we also have to look at.
So if you have a particularly sensitive meeting that you're made aware of is coming up, are you at times even consulted in advance on your opinion of the chosen venue, given the sensitivity of the information that's going to be discussed?
When we work with our regular clients, and we try to have a good open relationship with the security directors, and they'll let us know, if there's something they have a question about or something to ask our opinion on. Quite often we're called in at the last minute and we may not have a chance. So sometimes it's, we're trying to deal with a situation as we see it, but we'll give the best advice possible.
Talk about the specific incidents. And one of the things we had chatted about was like sexual harassment cases and where the TSCM actually winds up playing a part in that.
So, the third category that people would call us regarding is when there's been some kind of an incident, a break-in, some other kind of security incident. If there was a case of sexual harassment, then they may, even if they say they knew that there was a camera someplace, could there be more than one? Or were there any cameras? If someone's just acting in a bad way, that may have been enough to create the alarm, so to speak. But now they want to know, was he just being verbally abusive, or was he doing something else? Was there some other problem going on? So, we've been called in a variety of cases to help resolve hidden camera cases. There was one of our clients had found a camera in a locker room. And once that was discovered, for the sake of the company, they had us sweep every single locker room in 3 different facilities, bathrooms. They wanted to check everything. And it's compared to the cost of liability, it was definitely a good decision on their part. Another type of incident could be, as I mentioned, break-ins. Even the most secure facility, we had this happen right here in Westchester. Apparently, someone had been breaking into corporate offices up and down the Hudson, but they clearly had cased the place and knew when the trash was being collected and snuck in through the trash compactor access point, tailgated their way through the access control, stealing credit cards. And that was discovered. But when they reviewed the video cameras, the video recordings, they saw that the guy also went into a few executive offices, but no credit cards were stolen. So then that became a big question. Did he go in there for some other purpose? He may have just been stealing credit cards as a cover for going in for a more nefarious.
So I would imagine that would drive those types of activities would drive what you'd be recommending for the frequency of
right. Now,
of
in
sweeps.
that particular case as well, we had been in there probably just a month earlier in the very specific office that they were most concerned about. So because we're familiar with it, they called us up. We were there that same day to conduct a sweep that night so that they could be assured that there was no problem there.
So it's almost like, these COVID tests, you could get tested, 35 times in 35 days, and then you go get exposed and all of a sudden, you're positive.
Right.
So is there advancement in the technology? Are you looking at, rather than, quarterly, semi-annually, annual sweeps, a special event where you're actually, doing continuous online monitoring of the RF profile is that getting to an extreme?
There are ways to do that to an extent. They typically require a significant buy-in from the company that they want to check. For instance, one system that we looked into, they monitor cell phones in the company, and you register every employee's cell phone. So in other words, this is a bigger process. It's not just coming in one day and sticking something in there, but they register every employee's cell phone, and then they can set these systems up in multiple buildings, and they'll know if any cell phone comes in that's not one of the registered ones, that can raise a flag. So that's an extreme case, but in some situations that might be valuable. There's, the simplest thing is to keep communication with professionals in the security field. If you don't have your own in-house security director, you should be in touch with a consultant, and if there's any questions that come up, if there has been anything peculiar, you want to, take the professional steps to look into it.
Yeah, I think when you talk about stalking cases, the prevalence of covert video being used against the victims, we've actually seen situations where cameras were secreted at places of business, like you were saying, and with the one company with a camera in a locker room, but you have people that an employee starts a relationship with someone, and they gets to a point where it becomes problematic. One of the employees is terminated before that person leaves, puts a covert camera in, and then all of a sudden, now you're going back, and as the case develops and you wind up, and when orders of protection are filed and then subsequent arrests are made, they don't realize that there's still the company doesn't realize that there's that potential to that camera being there, and it's something that they really got to pay attention to.
Yeah.
You got to sort of think outside the box when it comes to this.
And unfortunately, it's not just the lower level employees. A lot of the cases that we deal with, when we discover a device has been planted or a real breach has happened, it's oftentimes an executive, perhaps one that was already in negotiations to be hired by a new company, or someone who was having personal problems. So the HR department is also has an important role to play in terms of understanding. For instance, if someone's fired for the sexual harassment, they make sure they understand, what else, or if someone was just fired for any reason, whether it's if they were involved in IT, what access did they have? They have access to the phone system, things like that. We had one, this was a while ago, but one of our firms that we work with, they were hired because the company, one Monday morning, everybody came to work and they all had voicemail messages on every single phone in the company, which was an irate caller bad-mouthing the CEO. They were like, how did this happen? It was a phone call. It was a recording of a phone call from 6 months prior. Long story short, they had recently fired one of their IT people who was responsible for the phones. We were able to track down that he had dialed in to their back-end voicemail number, and he knew how to manipulate the voicemail system, dig into the CEO's mailbox, which the CEO didn't use. It was all handled by his assistant. The assistant never changed the password. The password was 111111, right? Mm-hmm. Got into that mailbox, listened to old messages of the CEO, found a message from 6 months before, which was an irate customer just crazy cussing out the CEO. He said, "Oh, that's a nice message." And he forwarded that message, it's called broadcasting a message, to every phone in the company. And so they just needed to know what the heck happened. And they were able to track it down through different things. We were able to find out where that guy lived, and the phone came from that location. So the phone call came from that location.
Well, that's a good place to wrap the why and when for when sweeps are needed, and tease up our third segment, which we'll get into solutions. I'll remind everybody you are listening to the Risk Advisor podcast, hosted by myself, Jim Henry, and Sal Lafreri. We invite you to comment on our blog at theriskadvisor.com and to subscribe and follow us on our social media like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you are interested in having one or both of us speak at an upcoming event or would like to consult with us, please go to our webpage at theriskadvisor.com to set that up. So, solutions. How do you incorporate TSM into your security policies?
That's a very important question. And as I mentioned, we get a lot of phone calls from people they're tasked with trying to add sweeps into their company, and they've never thought about it before or never had to deal with it before. There's a lot of areas to look at. One is understanding the threat that your company faces. What are you guys dealing with? What kind of information is being handled? One of the things that I try to point out is, as important as cybersecurity is to protect the information on your network, on your servers, all of your valuable information began somewhere in a conversation, verbal conversation. That's the start, whether it was a decision that was being made or plans being made or some product being discussed. It all happened initially in a conversation. Where do those conversations take place? You want to try to identify the more sensitive areas in your company. Typically, we're going into the high-profile areas. There may be, the C-suite and the executive boardrooms. There may be some other areas that are equally important, whether it's the legal department, HR department we mentioned. They handle hiring and firing. If someone thinks they're going to lose their job, they may be interested in trying to get an edge by spying on some others. So that's an important aspect, understanding the nature, the level of your threat, which applies to all parts of security. You want to do a risk assessment. Hence, we're at the Risk Advisor. So, but then you want to look at your facility. Where are the more sensitive areas? What kind of security do you have? And then you can kind of figure out, well, maybe we want to have this done, more often than not. And we encourage conversation with us. If someone has that question, we can help them figure out, maybe start off sweeping the boardrooms and the executive offices, but maybe come back the next time, still do the boardroom, but maybe add a legal office, and then the third time come back, maybe now you add the HR department, just so that in the course of the year, you got the place covered to some degree. And again, as we mentioned, an important part of that is if there is an incident that happens, now you already have a relationship with a professional company who can come in quickly and help you, resolve that.
Part of the problem, at least what I see, is that and a lot of times when you're called in to do a sweep, what they want is, here's the room I want sweep the room. And you go, okay, but why? You don't need to know why. But we think we got a problem. We could list about 3 problems you got. None of them have to do with bugging. But talk to me. What's the problem? And it's the importance of having that relationship ahead of time,
right?
That they'll actually share with you. You don't need to know the specifics. I don't need to get from the CEO that the name of the company that they're looking to buy, but hey, we're in the process of, we just started a merger and acquisition program, or we're just starting a program where we may be acquiring a company. Okay, and give us an area, a place to shoot, for it. Give us some understanding of it, because we may come in and take a look at it, and in the assessment, we may say, you know what, boardroom may not necessarily be the place that we want to do this. Where you really may want to do it is in Janie's office down in research and development, or you may want to have the paralegal who we want to take a harder look at, because that's where most of the information is coming through, and that's where you're most vulnerable.
Right.
You almost have to go at it from the point of, if you were going to do it, if I was going to steal the information from you, how would I do it?
Where would you go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, how many times everybody wants to start with the CEO, and he's the last guy that's going to know what's going on.
In some cases, yeah. And that's an important point. Our clients that we have long-term relationships with, some clients we've dealt with for over 20 years, and others for quite a few years. We're in there regularly, but we have frequent conversations with the security director, and he may ask, hey, is this a concern? Here's something that came up in a conversation. Here's something we were wondering about. Or, like you said, they may realize, something's going on down in the legal department, or he may get word that somebody was going to be let go, And if we have that kind of relationship, we're already trusted, and we can have that conversation. And again, we don't need to know the specifics. We don't care about the name, but generally, that what's happening gives us understanding what's happening gives us an idea of where we should be looking and things like that.
Yeah, I'm starting to giggle because when you mentioned having the conversation with the particular company, how many times has it happened where a company calls you and they think that they're being bugged, and they call you up from the phone that they think they're being bugged on? Hey, I think I'm being bugged. Okay, where? Well, on this phone.
Yeah.
Why are you calling me?
Yeah, and that's always been a concern. Although it's probably more related to the days in the past when everybody had copper line phones, and you imagine the guy sitting out in the truck with the wires running out with the headphones on, and he's like smiling and snickering that the boss is now, calling on that, And
I would think that you're also, you're also going to highlight if for a company that you have had a relationship with and have done, frequently, sweeps, so you have a fair degree of confidence of how clean the space may be, and if they still feel that they're having, leaks, it could very well highlight, because they don't have as much suspicion that it's an electronic problem, it's an HR problem.
Right.
And like you say, all information starts with a conversation somewhere. So you are another leg of the stool of an overall policy, a business policy of confidentiality, so you work hand in hand with HR.
It is. We try to have a very close relationship with our clients in terms of understanding their needs and how we can best serve them. It's important not to look at technical countermeasures as a commodity. A lot of times I can kind of get the idea that someone calling us, they're thinking that we work like electricians. It's the same everywhere you go. If I get an electrician here, call down the other town, there's an electrician there. They have standards that they go by because it's very common. Our work is highly specialized. So it's not, you're not going to find the same level of operation just by finding somebody who I was going to say in the phone book, but that dates me, somebody that pops up, in an online search. You have to find out, well, for instance, we're constantly researching new technical threats from GSM, cellular bugs, Bluetooth. There's so many different technologies out there that we have to be prepared for. We didn't just go online and spend, $20,000 or $30,000. No, we have over $200,000 invested in the equipment that we use. We have to be trained on that, and we have to understand how to use it. And we have to know how to work within our clients' facilities. We can't just come barging into an office and trying to be being obnoxious and taking over the place. We want to work within the corporate environment and have an understanding of security, general security as well. All these things are significant and important.
Okay. Charlie, how can the listeners contact you?
Our website is execsecurity.com, and the email for me personally is charles@execsecurity.com. I'm always happy to discuss people's questions and concerns. I'm happy to even talk with other people in the field, or people have any questions at all. A lot of companies may think that they may want to, develop their own in-house team for doing sweeps. I'd be happy to discuss that with people, maybe to understand, where they could get training, but also what expenses might be involved with that. But in general, I try to make myself available for anyone who gets in touch.
Great. Well, thank you very much for being with us today. We just want to remind everybody you've been listening to the riskadvisor.com podcast hosted by Jim Henry and Sal Frary. We're going to ask you to subscribe to the show and like us on our social media sites like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you're interested in having one or both of us speak at an upcoming event or would like to consult with us, please go to the webpage at theriskadvisor.com and set that up. Also, if you know someone that would make a great guest, we're going to ask you to please go to the webpage at theriskadvisor.com and make your suggestion known there. And remember, you can hear the show on your favorite podcast platform, YouTube, and of course, you could stream it at theriskadvisor.com through Spreaker, our platform. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you tune in next week.